and Manu Chitrakar, Chitrakar is that last name. All right. And this very special story features an extraordinary jam session between two very distinctive storytelling traditions. African-American writer, and guess what, in Africa they often call the storyteller a griot. And the griot and the blues singer, Arthur Flowers, and the Indian scroll painter, Manu Chitrakar, have created this special book that we're going to share with you today. I See the Promised Land, which is a stunning biography of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And this powerful graphic narrative tells King's story through the major events that occurred during the apartheid South during his lifetime. And this book is so wonderful because it includes descriptions of the Montgomery bus boycott, the formation of the civil rights groups, and then the mass movements against segregation, such as the Albany movement and the Children's Crusade that was held in Birmingham, Alabama. This was held after which King became Black America's acknowledged leader. We are often told about how Dr. King traveled to Africa and India and how his travels there influenced him about his own personal struggles and the political challenges that he faced with the rise of Malcolm X and Black Power. So we find that in this book, the author, Arthur Flowers, tells about a masterful story in what some people call musical prose. So if you like to read and read with rhythm, this book is great for that also. And it is based on the griot oral storytelling traditions, and the griot oral storytelling traditions are very well known in places like Africa, where the stories are passed on to the children as they progress through life. All right? So let's begin with our very special story today. All right? I See the Promised Land. And with this book, I See the Promised Land, if you ever get a copy of this book, you can sing it, you can read it, you can rap it, and you can do a lot of different things with the book. All right. Hello there, Doc. Trickmaster, ask that this gate be open, this work be done. I'm a Hudo, and I am my thinker. Sit down. Why don't you rest a spell, my friend? I have a story to tell. I suspect that you've heard the Martin Luther King story as commonly told, but this is a telling replete with the will of, wow, what would a tale be worth without these things? Is it fitting, or it is fitting, that this tale starts with the birth of Martin Luther King? Unfortunately for my purposes, there is nothing particularly miraculous about his birth. No claim of divine patrimony, no interesting meteorological phenomena. It is, however, perhaps significant that he is the son and the grandson and the great-grandson of Southern Black Baptist preachers. This, in fact, cannot be overemphasized. He has an independent base. The black church, one of the few forces in the black community, not totally dependent on white patronage, black preachers have always stood on the front lines of struggle. And when it came time to move the people, Dr. King just turned his sermonizing skills into what they call political oration. All right, here we go. King, what they call a race man from the progressive wing of the Southern black bourgeoisie, folk for whom racial custodianship is a family tradition. He had been influenced by civil disobedience and the example of Mahatma Gandhi to speculate a plan of nonviolent protest and activism. As a budding young theologian, Dr. King expressed frustration with ministry that concerned itself only with the well-being in the hereafter. King felt that the well-apportioned ministry should also concern itself with the well-being of the world. In this case, he became a very important person, born as Martin Luther King Jr., but his role in life was going to be different. Now that the homie, a funny thing, fake free will, all that, I'm not quite sure how that worked, but I do claim with all my power that it was Martin Luther King's effort to be in the temple that night. He said he seen the promised land. It was his fate to be on the balcony of the Lorraine Hotel that night, that morning. I claim he was fated to be the ancestral call he is to us now. He is still famous. Now, please don't just drop that into your lap. It requires your undivided attention. In his heart, young Dr. King aspired to be an academic positioner, a life of study and meditation. But he decided, emulating his own professors, that a pastorate would be an appropriate first step. How will you, young King, master systematic theology if you have not been baptized in the field, so to speak? So he take up with the pastorate of the Dexter Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama. In doing so, he stepped forthrightly into the Hoodoo Board of Destiny. Now, just because you got the power doesn't necessarily mean you will be touched by the hard hand of the destiny. You don't become a true force unless you called upon by the spirit of the times. This then is the called destiny fashioned for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It is as if the gods in need of an instrument declared the blacks were to be despised of the earth. Oh no, but Dr. King had a different message. Now, we're talking about slavery, right? All right, we had Europeans in the West, Arabs in the East, and of course African on African land, where two blacks stand, none stand together. Uh-oh, they have divided them. It is the blacks of West Africa that come where they were captured, enslaved, manacled, and marched to the coast. Warehoused in the coastal castles of Shame, Ghana's Cape Coast, Senegal's Gorée Island. These must be experienced to be believed to be understood. Our ancestors produced positively until they were stacked onto slave ships, packed as human cargo. Men, women, and children, basting in their own way, sunk in despair and confusion as they are taken away from their homeland and brought to strange territory. What is this place? Who are these people? What has become of us? The Middle Passage, oh what? How many a million of our people are dead, tossed overboard, oh, to feed to the sharks? How many leap to their own accord? They just can't take anymore. Then they arrive in the Americas. This is the testing ground. For God's purposes, they must be stripped to the essence, and what better scourge of souls than slavery? And then, blacks were treated like inhumane livestock, worked to death, used as sexual playthings. They are the total discretion of their masters. It is life and death on a whim. And as the story goes on, the Great Migration, around the turn of the 20th century, of a great multitude of black folk left the South in what was called the Great Migration, a mass movement that turned to a troubled rural folk into an equally troubled urban folk. So now you got two contingents of black folk, North and South. North, the racism more subtle, discrimination more graceful, but in the South, it is straight out oppression, apartheid. Hard to explain to people what life was like in the apartheid South. Perhaps if you are untouchable of India, or black in the Sudan, perhaps then you know about apartheid. You're expected at all times to defer to the folk who were over you. You sat in the back of the bus. You drank from the colored water fountain. You stepped off the sidewalk if white people were coming at you. Black folk were treated then like they were inhumane. Worst thing, of course, is that black folk accepted this treatment, brought up in this world, reinforced by its law, and the ever-present threat of violence. They just don't know no better. Blacks who do challenge the status quo are often deprived of livelihood, homes, and sometimes their lives. But guess what? Night riders and lynchings were prevalent in those years when blacks tried to stand up. Men, women, and even children hung by the neck from trees, sometimes torched alive, and that would gather around what people might call clamoring or trying to be saved. This is the world into which Martin Luther King was born. This is the world that provides the call he came to answer. Young Dr. Martin Luther King, by many, was expected, of course, to follow in the footsteps of his father, his grandfather, and his great-grandfather as pastor of the Ebenezer Baptist Church. But destiny called in the guise of the Montgomery bus boycott. The Montgomery bus boycott, which was held in 1955, the touch of destiny's hand. Now wait a minute. Now I suspect you know the story of at least what everybody else knew. Montgomery, Alabama, 1955. And many of the boys and girls are learning about this story in school and in other places. The rule is that black folk have to sit in the back of the bus. Why? Segregation. Can't sit in the white section of the bus, or you have to stand in the black section if a white person wants to sit down. But on this particular day, a lady by the name of Sister Rosa Parks, feet are tired and she don't feel like standing. So she sat there on that hard rock of destiny and found it to her liking. And so she is arrested. It is, after all, the law that you stand or sit in the back of the bus if you were black. So then there was a local leader, E.D. Nixon, who had been looking for a case he could use to challenge the bus laws and institute a direct action campaign. He recognized Sister Parks for the blessing that she really is. And then somebody, the community, would defend and support. So he called together the activist leaders of Black Montgomery. They formed the Montgomery Improvement Association, and the legendary Montgomery bus boycott is on. Now, Martin Luther, new to the Montgomery area, took up the Dexter Baptist Church, posting a bid to escape the long shadow of Daddy King, and had thrown himself into ministering his pastorate. This is where he formed his lifelong partnership with Ralph Abernathy. They both were members of the activist wing of Montgomery's ministry. But he only had been there about a year or so when time came to nominate the leadership of the Montgomery Improvement Association. King is nominated mostly because he is not one of the entrenched factions. He takes on the leadership reluctantly. He felt unprepared. But who's prepared when there is a call? It is in doing that you gain the grace that helps you to succeed. The factions that they had in King, a malleable instrument that would take the heat. If it all fell apart, it wasn't until he spoke at the first mass meeting with the community that the factions realized they had stumbled into the lap of destiny. Martin Luther King became one of the masters of the world. He was a great orator of historical power. He could speak, he could stand, he was tall in his statue of representation. Dr. King was a man with a vision. If we protest courageously and yet with dignity and Christian love, when the history books are written in the future, somebody will have to say, there lived a race of people, of black people, of people who had the moral courage to stand up for their rights. And thereby, they injected a new meaning into the veins of history and civilization. Some folk that was there that first evening call it the Great Awakening. He had not yet solidified his nonviolent strategies. As all good things tend to do, that came out in the crucible of struggle. But you can see the seeds in his view of the movement as a moral struggle and his evolving vision of the African American's role in America's destiny and the destiny of the world too. Boy, got that long game vision, put everything in a strategic context. This is the good thing. For I would you people be a master strategy, the key that opens all locks. But I digress. A good story, you got to keep the pieces in order. Illumination is a process, and the layers of understanding must be precisely laid. I'm going to pause for just a minute, because I promised you we were going to bring you another one of your favorite finger plays. But we are reading today from the book, I See the Promised Land, A Life of Martin Luther King Jr., written by Arthur Flowers and Manu Chitrakov. All right. Now, we did Five Little Monkeys jumping on the bed when we first came on. Some of you know this one too, I bet. Five little ducks went out to play over the hills and far away. Mother duck said, quack, 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 and four little ducks came running back. Four little ducks went out to play over the hills and far away. Mother duck said, quack, 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 and three little ducks came running back. Three little ducks went out to play over the hills and far away. Mother duck said, quack, 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 and two little ducks came running back. Two little ducks went out to play over the hills and far away. Mother duck said, quack, quack, quack. One little duck came running back. One little duck went out to play over the hills and far away. Father duck said, quack, 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 and all five of those ducks came wobbling back. All right, and so that's one that you can adjust and change the numbers if you want to make them higher or lower. Five little ducks went out to play, and we did the Five Little Monkeys jumping on the bed earlier. How about this one? Some of you remember this one? Head and shoulders, baby. 1, 2, 3. Head and shoulders, baby. 1, 2, 3. Head and shoulders, head and shoulders, head and shoulders, baby. 1, 2, 3. Knees and ankles, baby. 1, 2, 3. Knees and ankles, baby. 1, 2, 3. Knees and ankles, knees and ankles, knees and ankles, baby. 1, 2, 3. And guess what? You can jump up and down, baby. 1, 2, 3. Especially those of you who are gathered around the radio. Turn around, baby. 1, 2, 3. Jump and clap your hands, baby. 1, 2, 3. Nod your head, baby. 1, 2, 3. Jump, turn around, nod your head, clap your hands, baby. 1, 2, 3. And you can just add as many movements and actions as you would like. All right? And so those are some of the children's favorite finger plays, and hopefully you've been practicing those Swahili numbers. Let's see. Moja, Mbili, Tatu, Ine, Tano, Sita, Saba, Nane, Tisa, Kumi. All right, let's try it one more time. Moja, Mbili, Tatu, Ine, Tano, Sita, Saba, Nane, Tisa, and Kumi. All right, those are your Swahili numbers. Hope you keep practicing. We're going to bring a quiz to you soon on one of our shows. We're going to go back to our story today, and as we are winding down, and we are reading from the book I See the Promised Land, A Life of Martin Luther King Jr., written by Arthur Flowers and Manu Chitrakov. All right, the black folk of Birmingham. They respond with an unprecedented boycott of bus services. They set up carpools that defied tickets and all manner of harassment. Both the Hale and the Cane folk walk and walk and walk and defy all attempts to intimidate them. The powers that could be cooperated by refusing all redresses. It is the law, they insist. We can't go against the law, people. Then where would we be? That first day, Dr. King and the male leadership didn't know what to expect. But when bus after bus go by empty, they knew then that black folks had decided to be in the struggle. This in itself was a new movement for the people. The thing that most distressed young Dr. King about the Southern apartheid is black acquiescence in their own oppression. When the blacks would not participate or support the struggle, that was the most distressful thing for him. Too many of our people accept inferiority as their given place was the thought of Dr. King. But for 385 days, the blacks of Montgomery defied harassment, intimidation, bombs, and all manner of repression. What was at first a joke to the powers that be became on some parts grudging respect, on some parts unreasoning anger. Montgomery's insignificance convinced the blacks, as Frederick Douglass once noted, power concedes nothing without demand. And so the thoughts of some of the people who were in the powers to be were, how dare they challenge us? How dare they challenge our way of life? Well, they did. They will have to make Montgomery give it up, was what Dr. King thought. So black folks came, they walked, and they walked, and they walked, and they walked, and they carpooled, and they carpooled, and they booked, and they booked, and they walked, and they walked. Whatever it takes, we're going to do it. King is very delighted. He asked one older, elderly lady walking by if she wasn't too old for this. He asked her if her feet were not too tired. She said to Dr. King, "My feet is tired," she said, "but my soul is rested. My feet is tired, but my soul is rested." And Dr. King liked that. He liked that a lot. That made his heart full to bursting. Then Montgomery got hot on him. There were arrests, there were death threats, and there were bombings. These threats reflect unsettling developments in American culture. The Brown versus the Board of Education had riled up old school white folk. Next thing they know, they got black folks sitting in and marching and picketing and freedom riding and all manner of foolishness is what they were saying. What's wrong with these people? And they were standing out there with signs that said, "We don't go to school with Negroes. We don't go to school with Negroes. We do not go to school with Negroes." And with the revival of the Ku Klux Klan, the White Citizens Councils came forward. And the Old South responded by closing schools, closing swimming pools, and the vigilante violence that had always served them so well was flaring up its head. That little Emmett Till fellow, they say he whistled at a white girl. They necktied that boy with barbed wire, tied to a cotton gin, and throwed him into the Tallahatchie River. So when Dr. King's house got bombed, friends and family back in Atlanta tried to talk him out of it. He said to them, "I appreciate your concern, but it's just too late. I have begun the struggle, and I can't turn back. I've reached the point of no return," Dr. King said. At the mass meetings, he kept the good colored folk of Montgomery fired up. They told them a man can't ride you unless your back is bent. He told them, "We won't stop until we've won our full freedom in this country and redeemed the soul of America." Note that move now, that redeemed the soul of America bit. that little bit of ideological orchestration, this is what makes Martin Luther King so special. He's saying that this is not just about us. This is about saving everybody. Keep an eye on this now, equating the black struggle with the struggle for human dignity. This is where Dr. Martin Luther King found his dream. After 385 days of struggle, the Supreme Court ruled segregation in Montgomery, Alabama is illegal. And to the relief of the business community, the buses desegregated and the black folks come back sitting where they please. So the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and the Great Black Book of Generations, it is the Montgomery bus boycott that add Dr. Martin Luther King's name to the Great Black Book of Generations. It is the Montgomery campaign that established him as a leader, that established his nonviolent strategy as one that colored folk emulate all over the South. For these are tumultuous times and just right for his brand of nonviolent civil disobedience. Blacks all over the South, standing upright, raising up their heads, bent so long they almost forgot now how to hold their heads up. The jubilant victors decide they need a more formal organization, one based on the black church. They formed the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and set up an office in Atlanta with one employee, the indomitable Ella Baker. Old line groups like the NAACP and the Urban League are wary of this newcomer. Dr. Martin Luther King assures them there is more than enough struggle to go around that he would step on nobody's toes. Basically, this period of the King's ministry consists of getting called into struggles to desegregate various cities across the South by local activists in need of King's high-profile and strategic resources. Like some Black Belt pilgrimage, these cities have been entered into the Great Black Book of Generations. In his book, Where Do We Go From Here? King claimed it is a privilege to become instrument of a great idea. He quote Toynbee's claim that the Negro will give Western civilization the spiritual dynamic it so badly needs. King say he hoped the spiritual power of the Negro can radiate out to the world and challenge the nations of the world to higher ground. A chosen people scenario trying to avoid the chosen people syndrome by rooting it in a vision of service. This would bring Dr. King to a vision of black folk as a folk with a destiny. This is what moved him to this level. He visited Africa and India to solidify his global vision. Ghana, he's a guest at the inauguration of the president of the first African country to achieve independence. King realized now there's a world full of black people to serve. India, he walked around New Delhi in a Gandhi cap, following in the footsteps of his idol, his mentor in struggle. He identifies with the untouchables and is impressed by India's affirmative action program with Gandhi's attempt to give them dignity. Children of God, indeed. He is further reinforced in his own belief in nonviolence as a viable strategy. Since being in India, I am more convinced than ever before that the method of nonviolence resistance is the most potent weapon available to oppressed people in their struggle for justice and human dignity. In a real sense, Mahatma Gandhi embodied in his life certain universal principles that are inherent in the moral structure of the universe. And these principles are as inescapable as the law of gravitation. He resolves upon returning home to be more like Gandhi. First thing he does is set a day aside for meditation and reflection. You know about how long that lasts? Things to do, people to see. King accepted that he is not the most disciplined of the holy men. Round about this time, he decides that he needs a bigger stage. He leaves Montgomery and returns to Alabama. And returns to Albany, Georgia, and Atlanta. Just in time for his next big challenge in Albany, Georgia, the Albany Movement of 1961. November of 1961. The Albany Movement is formed by local activists in Albany, Georgia. 1,000 of blacks are mobilized in a broad-based assault on segregation practices. December 1961, Dr. King is invited in. He decides he can spare a day for them, but is arrested in a mass sweep and sentenced to jail. King refuses bail until the city makes concessions he accepts as a win. But when Albany doesn't follow through on his promises, he returns. He is arrested again, but understanding now the value of being incarcerated, he once again refuses bail. The police chief, an equally perceptive fellow, pays his bail. Dr. King says he's been thrown off buses and out of lunch counters, but this is the first time he's ever been thrown out of jail. After almost a year of struggle, dissension, and a refusal by the powers that be to engage in media-worthy violence, the campaign's energy is sapped, and the Southern Christian leadership withdraws in a defeat pregnant with lessons learned and new strategies. Civil disobedience and marches have become their primary instrument. The strategy is to force confrontations with violent authorities and shame America by generating media coverage that force the government to act against the evident evils of the Southern apartheid. The Southern position is that blacks are happy and comfortable with the system the way it is. And too many Americans believe this to be so. So Martin Luther King is determined to show the life of that. Albany is counted as one of his failures, but failures can be useful too. Albany supplied lessons King applied to Birmingham. And it looks like we are about out of time for this book, and guess what? I'm going to have to bring this back again during another time to finish this special story about Dr. Martin Luther King, because the next part of this book goes to Birmingham, and it goes to the Children's Crusade that was held in 1963, showing that children played a very significant role in the civil rights movement. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we're going to have to say Mandina Uzuri Watoto, which means goodbye, beautiful children in Swahili. Tune in again next time for another edition of Family Rewards of Life. My name is Gloria Kirkland Holmes. Please have a great day.
When we hear a certain call, when the world must come together as one, there are people dying. Oh, when it's time to lend a hand to life, the greatest gift of all. JazzHats.com, home of the coolest hats on earth. The new Jazz Lounge. Funky, cool, and yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.